All right, here we are in Lattimore Township, Pennsylvania. Beautiful June day. Uh, Down here by the Lattimore Creek, or a little branch thereof. Um, I've been writing a weekly column for the website Splice Today under the editorship of Russ Smith, aka Mugger, for the last few years. I guess getting up to around 200 columns maybe. But I thought I would start reading my column every week just on YouTube. I don't know if this is a podcast or whatever. Um, and, like maybe gloss it or discuss it a little bit as I do so. I don't know if this is a good idea or not. I guess you can measure it in views, but I've never been terribly good at gathering views on YouTube. All right, well. Okay, so this week, and I guess this is what, June 20 something, 2019. I kind of took a break from ragging on Joe Biden or whatever and wrote about the renewed controversy over the metric system. The issue was raised again by James Panero of the New Criterion, is that right? I'm not sure. Okay, and Tucker Carlson on Fox. I first wrote about this actually for Mugger as well in year 2000, I think, when the UK had made it illegal to weigh loose goods for individual sale in pounds and ounces, and were confiscating butcher's scales and stuff like that. But basically my preference for, I guess, what they're calling traditional to avoid the term imperial weights and measures is aesthetic and historical, in the sense that no matter how I try, I don't really have a picture of a kilometer. Okay. And also, of course, like sort of a libertarian move where, you're actually, at one point it was illegal in the UK to translate metric weights and measures into imperial on your label. I don't know why. Often I don't understand how people are thinking about the law or what a reasonable incursion into all of our lives consists of. All right, anyway, I guess I'm going to read the column, okay? This will be very exciting for you. Metrically woke. Perhaps Brexit was inevitable as soon as they started confiscating butchers' scales. The battle between metric and imperial or customary measurement recently rejoined by anti-metrite pundits James Panero and Tucker Carlson shows, first of all, that there is a real world out there apart from our representations of it. Okay, I'm not going to assert that the difference between metric and imperial weights establishes metaphysical realism, but it suggests it. And we can establish it otherwise. The whole thing makes no sense, of course, the opposition between different systems of weights and measures, unless there's stuff in the world, liquids, for example, or the distance between this and that can be measured in various ways without being altered by the measurement. See, people often assert that representations create reality. Well, this is a good example that there can be distinct representational systems with regard to the same reality, or otherwise the difference in the systems is incomprehensible. Okay, that metric and imperial are convertible into one another presupposes that there are real facts outside of our heads and our cultural practices. That might cause consternation among postmodernists, narrativists, absolute idealists, social constructionists, and phenomenologists everywhere, showing them to be trapped in a world they never made, like Howard the Duck. Deep in their hearts, they already knew they were trapped in such a world that we didn't construct, except in maybe the ordinary sense of like building buildings on it and stuff. On the other hand, even though they don't create worlds, things like systems of measurement do reflect and shape us. They don't change things other than ourselves much, though they do alter rulers, measuring cups, signage, and scales, for example. So though the recent resurgence of devotion to Fahrenheit, cups and gallons, yards and miles, pounds and ounces, bushels and pecks, makes no never mind with regard to the nature of the world, it expresses something about us, about how we encounter the one reality we all inhabit, and about who we actually are and who we want to convince ourselves that we are. In that sense, I'm going to assert that metric as a system for measuring all things yields an unfortunate and in some sense misleading way of experiencing the world. It represents a kind of wishful thinking. One way to express my objection is in terms of aesthetics. Traditional measurements are eccentric and complexly interrelated, having emerged over centuries for various purposes. That's the kind of thing that Pinero and Carlson are emphasizing, how traditional this is and culturally resonant. That's not necessarily my primary point. They are connected explicitly, the traditional measures are connected explicitly to the human body. The foot as a foot, the yard as a stride, and so forth. I might compare the picture of the world they yield, the traditional measures yield, to the paintings of Rembrandt. Complex, human, uneven, with a light not to be measured exclusively in lumens, that both reveals and obscures. We might think of the metric system, on the other hand, as more along the lines of neoclassicism like that of Jacques-Louis David, or even minimalism a la Mondrian or Donald Judd, the result of a kind of brutal rationalization of experience that tries to make the world into a reflection of human logic, or even to reduce the world to something immediately and delusorily comprehensible. It's an attempt to box the universe up and rake it with Klieg lights, destroying all shadows. Neither system, in short, is the exclusive truth, and neither is merely falsifying, though each might reveal things that the other conceals, particularly in the relation of the units of measurement to one another within each system. But the traditional measures yield a more beautiful and a richer experience, or rather, as things stand now, resist a brutal authoritarian simplification. Any system of measurement is rationally arbitrary. The basic measures could be entirely different and no less reasonable or useful or true. For example, if the meter were 2.317 times as long as it is now, and the entire system of measures adjusted accordingly, the system as a whole would be no less accurate, no less rational, though no more, and no less useful. But the latter, the leader, the Celsius degree, the lumen, are dedicated to the delusion that we can understand the world by reducing it to decimal notation, and are dedicated as well to producing the illusion that this bristlingly complex, little understood universe can be counted on your fingers. There's no particular relation of reality to base 10 mathematics, as Pinero points out. The world does not appear to us or exist in any relation at all to base 10 mathematics. If you gather up 1,000 meters, you get a kilometer. that bears no more relation to reality in itself than 5,280 feet to the mile, or a base 12 system of inches and feet. Or I might even essay the position that the 10 by 100 by 1,000 system bears less relation to reality than more seemingly arbitrary systems, because the world is infinitely complex and by and large not symmetrical. The metric system is dedicated above all to disguising its own irrational basis, and people have used it to demand this merely apparent reasonableness from ourselves and to force the world to reflect it. Perhaps it is somewhat easier to learn and master than some other systems, being more systematic, but children ultimately do fine with whatever system they learn. The traditional measures, I think, yield a more beautiful, subtle, more complex, and richer experience of the one reality that both systems seek to describe. If so, they also yield a more truthful system, not because the metric system does not describe reality, but because it induces the delusion of comprehension, or seeks to promise a fully comprehensible world, which is the kind of thing no system of measurement can deliver. In fact, nothing can deliver that. And it encourages the self-delusion of people, such as the government officials who enforce it, who regard themselves as more rational than the people on whom it is enforced. For the metric system, ironically enough, has become extremely imperialistic. Many people think it's obvious that it should be imposed on every society, including, for example, American and British society, by law. Indeed, it has already been imposed on the UK as a condition of entry into the EU. This is a sort of representational colonialism. It asserts that everyone must measure the world, must represent it and experience it in the same way. That is of the essence of oppression. And the assertion of universal rationality underlying it is politically problematic and also false. As a condition of the UK integrating into the EU, it was required to demonstrate the essence of the metric system, enforcement and capitulation. Measurement police started confiscating scales marked in pounds and ounces. I recall the response of one British butcher back in 2000. They better bring men. They better bring big men. They did. Perhaps Brexit was inevitable from that moment. The Metric Association of the UK, there is such a thing, describes its preferred measures as, quote, powerful and wide-ranging, a world standard and a proper system to be enforced on an improper universe and on deeply unsystematic people. The French revolutionaries, who in a kind of enlightenment ecstasy first imposed the system, thought of themselves as overcoming God and tradition-ridden ignorance, as emerging finally from the Dark Ages. They were merely deluded about the nature of the world, but above all about the nature of themselves. All right. I guess, I don't know if that's the most serious subject. I used it to get metaphysical or something. And I might go back and get some of my favorite columns, or some of the columns I think stand up or are funny, and add them. But meanwhile, I think probably every Monday, for a while anyway, I'll be recording these and uploading them. Have a good day. Peace.